last night I finally got around to finishing up season 3 of The Mandalorian.
Oh.
I wrapped up watching season 3, the big, exciting climactic finale, and I came to a realization.
Oh boy.
I'm bored of Star Wars.
It took you pretty long, actually.
I'm bored of Star Wars. I want to say up front, I'm not interested in having a Star Wars bash fest or a Star Wars bitch fest. I feel like the internet is filled with that. It's tiring. It's boring. It's even more boring than Star Wars itself. Star Wars fandom has become a cesspool of toxicity. It is not fun to immerse yourself in the way it used to be. So I'm not interested in doing that. I don't bring it up for that reason.
Fair enough.
Because when I become bored of something that I once loved, what I don't do is take to the internet to tell everyone about how this sucks and this has sucked since whatever time. I'm angry about it. They've destroyed this thing that I once loved and all that. What I do is I move on with my life. And
it's very mature of you.
I think I'm almost there. I'm not 100% there because there's a thing or two coming up that I'm looking forward to still. I'm going to watch, but I'm pretty close to there.
I didn't finish Mandalorian, because I got bored with it, which is crazy because for me because that came out before Boba Fett, having something even tied to, the armor, I guess you would say, because that's what the whole big thing always was with him.
There's a callback to our villains episode from a couple weeks ago talking about villains. You are a proponent of Boba Fett as an awesome villain. I'm not, but I understand why.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that.
Oh yeah, no, I'm in the minority.
But I did start watching Boba Fett, and then that turned into The Mandalorian.
Yes, yeah.
So then I got I was a little bit upset at that because I was enjoying the whole Boba Fett thing because I grew up as a kid being like, I want to see the story, and then they brought him back and the tie-in with Patton Oswalt, with Parks and Rec and the that whole thing that happened. Did you watch Parks and Rec?
I watched the first 3 seasons, maybe 4.
So you didn't see the Patton Oswalt episode?
I got as far as when they went to Washington D.C.
But you don't remember, because I saw it all, but season-wise, but you did not see an episode with Patton Oswalt standing up giving a speech in front of at a community.
I'm familiar
hall.
with the clip. If I don't recall if I saw the actual episode,
but you might have seen
I know
online.
The clip.
So he plays this nerd where he's like filibustering, or he's talking about they need to make a Boba Fett show, and he describes how it should open. Boba Fett will punch through the sand, and he claws himself out of the blah, 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 and the sun is the very first scene that you see in the show is that scene. So they literally went back to what Patton Oswalt said, and they said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to match it.
Yeah, but 2 things. One, the comics had already done that.
Right.
And basically that same thing. And 2, it's kind of, and this isn't a criticism of Patton Oswalt, but that's kind of the most obvious thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like he gets swallowed by the Sarlacc pit. He's in this big pit in the middle of the desert. If you're gonna have him come back, of course that's how you're gonna show it. You're gonna have this dramatic, he's coming up out of the sand.
But the fact that they tied it into, you can literally play what he's saying, and it's like a shot for shot,
right?
Like the shot of the sun and it was just funny that in general that they even did that, just for the nerd factor.
So did you start watching season 3 or
of Mandalorian?
Yeah,
I don't think so, but that kind of goes in. That works proves kind of the same thing with you, where I just kind of got bored with it. I wasn't like, oh, I can't wait till the next season comes out.
Yeah, I was very much looking forward to it because I loved the first season. I thought the first season was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I really liked the second second season. Not as good as the first, but still I really enjoyed it. And I didn't care for the Boba Fett series, but I did like his episodes. Din Djarin, I guess they're his, but I liked the Mandalorian episodes when basically.
So you liked the Mandalorian episodes of Boba Fett, but didn't like Boba Fett episodes because you were never a big Boba Fett.
Well, and I didn't dislike the Boba Fett series because I wasn't a big Boba Fett fan. because I like Boba Fett fine. I just didn't get fully immersed in the mystique of them the way others did.
But this is the thing. The reason I liked the Boba Fett show was because it was that in between. It was sort of like the fell into the original Star Wars that I grew up with. It's like immediately after Return.
Right.
So it felt like the feel of it, even if they didn't, even if it's just in my head, the feel of it felt, this is like 80s kind of.
Oh, sure, yeah, I understand
Star Warsy. So that was appealing to me, and because it continued off Return, so you felt like this is just a continuation of Return. This is like us getting to see immediately after what happened after Return of the Jedi ended.
That's one of the reasons why I really liked the animated series Rebels, Star Wars Rebels, which because it's set in that era. It's set shortly before the original movie, and actually leads into that and leads into Rogue One, and it has that vibe that I like with Star Wars. I like that era. I like that vibe. I like the whole the Empire is the big baddie, and we're just these scrappy rebels and all that sort of thing. The most recent thing prior to Mandalorian season 3 was Andor, which I absolutely loved.
Mm-hmm.
Loved Andor.
I do like Andor.
It's among my very favorite Star Wars things ever. Absolutely loved it. And then there was the Bad Batch season 2 animated series,
which is a good example of. There's just so much stuff. I almost I saw that pop up somewhere, and I was, what is this?
Like, it's hard to keep up with it all.
Yeah.
Especially if you're not familiar with the animated side of things.
Yeah, I'm definitely not.
And there's a lot of good stuff in the animated side of things, but yeah, the Bad Batch is one of these things where a lot of people would be like, I don't know what this is, and like, where do I even begin? It doesn't do a good job of even telling you what it is. So the Bad Batch is a continuation of the Clone Wars series.
Okay.
And of course, the Clone Wars series is the animated series from some years back that takes place between episodes 2 and 3. It's the Clone Wars.
The Shadows of the Empire.
So the Clone Wars series culminates with it takes place, the very end of the Clone Wars series takes place concurrently with Revenge of the Sith, episode 3.
Okay.
Of like the clones turning on the Jedi and all that kind of thing, and the collapse of the Old Republic and the birth of the Empire. So the Bad Batch picks up exactly there at with the Old Republic getting overthrown, the Jedi being killed, and so on. And that's when the Bad Batch picks up. And the Bad Batch is kind of it deals with kind of like the early days of the Empire, the birth and building of the Empire, which is pretty cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
But I haven't gotten around to watching the second season. Like I liked the first season fine, but it wasn't so good that I recommend it to run around recommending to just casual viewers. Star Wars Rebels I do because it was great. Clone Wars, at its best, Clone Wars is fantastic, but Clone Wars was an anthology show, so it's hard to just tell someone watch the Clone Wars, because for every story arc that's fantastic, there is a story arc or two that isn't, and they're all over the map. And and so you don't want to tell someone like, you should watch the Clone Wars, but you need to watch season 3 episodes 4 through 7 and season and episodes 12 through 13 and season 4, have this list of only watch these specific story arcs, though that is the best way to watch it. I don't know though, but like Mandalorian, it started off so great, and the third season, I found myself I watched the first episode and I was like, okay. And then the second episode came out, and I think I watched that the first night as well. I was like, okay. And then the third episode came out.
All right.
And I think I took 2 or 3 days to get to it, maybe 3 or 4 days to get to it, which is unusual for the stuff that I'm locked into. But I watched the third episode. I was like, all right. And the fourth episode came out, and I don't think I got to it until the fifth episode was already out. Until all of a sudden I was just lagging way behind. And I only just got around to finishing the series. I will say that the season did come around in the end, and it ended really well. At least as far as story is concerned, action is concerned, special effects is concerned, all that stuff was great. The dialogue was terrible. It was it was a lot of stuff where characters are saying things basically to explain to the audience.
I hate that.
and it's one of
show
these,
don't tell.
yeah.
That's just lazy writing.
So there's this one scene, and this is just one of many examples throughout the season, especially in the last few episodes. I'm gonna spoil a little bit. Whatever. It's so part of this story arc for the season is getting the various Mandalorian tribes back together. Right. We have to reunite the Mandalorians, and there's this one group of Mandalorians that had been out somewhere else. And they have like their imperial ship that they captured, yada yada. You're out there with them, you see them get united, and you see that the ship is going to go back to where the Mandalorians now have their base. So now the next scene is like at where they're going to have where their base is going to be, right? And it's in this city. And the ship is flying over the city. And these characters are looking up at the ship and they're like, "Oh, look at this Imperial cruiser is here." And the other character's like, "That's not an Imperial cruiser. See those markings on there? That's the Mandalorian ship." And it's like, yeah, we know. We literally just watched all this happen. We know. Why is this scene here? And it was presented in this very unnatural, like, I'm reinforcing this for the audience kind of way. And there's a ton of that. It's just
that just bothers me because it feels like they think that the audience is dumb.
Yeah.
Or that there's been a point where people go, look, people are on their phones and watching this. And if you're not paying attention, you have to keep constantly saying the same thing over so they know what the hell's going on.
You really have to trust the audience. You really have to. And writing, whether it's in TV or film, writing that doesn't trust the audience always gets under my skin.
Yeah, I hate that.
Always gets under my skin. Just trust it. Like, we'll piece it together.
Do you think they do it because they think a lot of young people are watching?
I'm sure that's part of it. I did notice that this season of The Mandalorian was very much more kind of I don't know if you want. I don't know that kid friendly is the right term, but like sort of more all ages. And Star Wars always has been.
Yeah, of course.
It's Star Wars has always been geared towards people of all ages and appealing to kids. I have no problem with that. But
there's something about Empire Return and Star Wars. They didn't do that in those movies, and I loved them as kids, and they didn't hold my hand walking through that.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not one of these older fans who insists that Star Wars has to be gritty and mature and grizzled,
right.
Just because I am. I still like and appreciate the fact that Star Wars can appeal to people.
Yeah, it has
a
sense of humor too.
Yeah, I think that's a positive thing. But yeah, this writing, especially in this past season, was just it was almost like they sometimes felt like they needed to explain something to 5-year-olds or whatever. And in a different Star Wars show, I might not have minded as much. But, The Mandalorian sold us on the idea that it was kind of this Western in space. This lone gunslinger doing his thing, a Western coupled with Lone Wolf and Cub, this samurai manga. And that was really appealing. It was a different take on what the Star Wars universe was. And that's something that I had always wanted to see. It's one of the reasons why I really loved Andor, because it was like, this is a big, vast universe with interesting people and characters and politics and all the rest. So stop giving me the same old like Jedi Skywalker battles.
We not only have we had that discussion 1,000 times about it's a big universe, the Skywalkers don't have to be involved. You can have all these other stories going on.
Yeah.
But I've heard that, online too, where people are just give us in the universe, give us the universe, but have other people's lives going on.
And that's one of the reasons why I loved Andor, because it was very on the ground.
Yeah.
It was very street level. Like I always wanted to see, like, okay, show me what it's like to actually live in this place. What is it like to live in the Star Wars universe? And Andor did that. And I loved The Mandalorian because it was like this kind of, in Star Wars, I'm sorry, A New Hope. That's my old guy snide remark. So right, in A New Hope, you get a taste of the seedy side of it, when they go into the cantina in Mos Eisley and all that. So, you get that. You see that there's that underworld. You see that there's that little side of things. But the original trilogy is about the big grand arc of, the Rebels versus the Empire and Luke and Vader and all that kind of stuff. So The Mandalorian kind of brings you back to that seedy side of things and says, okay, let's see what this world is all about. Like, let's see what the deal is with these bounty hunters and these little taverns on these remote fringe worlds, these outer rim planets and things like that. And that was really great. The music was kind of a science fiction version of spaghetti western music. It had this really cool atmosphere that felt different and yet was still Star Wars. And now this season of Star Wars of Mandalorian is just, maybe some people will like it because it's sort of, I feel like it's trying to recapture that sort of very just classic style Star Wars. But the thing is, it didn't need to, because it was
his own thing, right?
Yeah, it was its own thing. So I found myself just really bored by it. I was like, oh, like I
Do you think that sometimes these shows don't have an ending, and so then the writing becomes bad because now they're just filling?
Yeah, they're just filling. To extend it. I did get the sense in this particular season that perhaps they had the thought that they needed to hit a younger demographic, that they weren't capturing enough of that demographic. I don't think that the numbers were down, because The Mandalorian has been a hit.
Right.
At least it's been a big critical darling. I mean, the first season was a big smash
Yeah,
hit.
yeah. I mean,
really got Disney Plus off to a running start. And the second season, though some people didn't like it as much, was still a big hit as far as I'm aware. But it may have skewed a little older, and maybe they figured that they needed to get some younger viewers as well. As far as like the planning ahead thing, they are actually all these series are leading into a movie.
Okay, but that doesn't.
So I do think to some extent they're trying to build something going forward. Though to what extent they had planned all that out from the beginning, I don't know.
And that doesn't mean that they're writing to an ending. That just means
True.
they're writing to a point.
True.
Without having a.
Yes, that is true. Because that is one of these things with these big mega franchises like this and the Marvel movies and all these others, is where, like, by their very nature, they are designed to never end.
Yeah, which is terrible, because in recent times there have been shows that have been smart enough. Ted Lasso, Succession, a couple others where you go, wow, they're ending this season.
Yeah,
and it's great. Because now it's this like full told story, this like package that is going to end. It's going to end right.
Yeah, we talked about that in our Ted Lasso episode, where it's like, they should have the courage to finish a show, to have an endpoint in mind, and to write to it. And I understand that there's dollars involved. There's so much money at stake, and Disney's whole experiment with Disney Plus is apparently not reaping the financial rewards that they hoped for.
But it's very American, because having watched British TV shows for a long time, they always end. And as an American, I used to almost be upset, because I would watch some show and be like, oh, the show's only 6 episodes a season and it ends in 3.
Yeah,
But I love those shows.
Absolutely.
They're some of my favorite shows because they did end, and because every episode was great.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
Where in America, it's like 16 episodes, 12 seasons.
Oh, that's similar to the thing. I would even go so far as to call it a problem with comics, for instance, ongoing comics. As far as like mainstream superhero comics. You take something like Batman. Batman has been happening since the 1930s. Batman, it's still Bruce Wayne since the 1930s. They by their very nature, they have to keep going. Yeah. You can't
couldn't even imagine. I mean, didn't they try that with Superman?
Didn't
they try to kill him?
They did, but it was a publicity stunt.
Oh, they were never gonna have it. It wasn't going to end. Like, they knew when they killed him.
Yeah.
They weren't even
Yeah,
I
don't know that they.
Because I didn't follow.
I don't know that they had the full plan on how they were going to bring him back already mapped out. But yeah, no, they were absolutely not. Like fully kill. And anytime, look, you'll see that a lot of times in comic books where there's going to be this high profile death.
Right.
It is never a permanent.
Isn't there a Spider-Man one too or something?
There's only
I have a visual, even though I didn't read comics, of them like holding, or maybe it was a Superman one.
There's
people
only
holding up a.
There's only a couple that they consider basically like the
rebirth.
Like these characters can't come back kind of thing, and even then they've kind of messed with. And that's like Spider-Man's Uncle Ben.
Okay.
Right? Uncle Ben gets killed. They can't come back.
Batman's parents.
Bruce Wayne's parents. They can't come back. Spider-Man's girlfriend, Gwen Stacy, who got, killed in the 70s. She gets thrown off a bridge. The Green Goblin and Spider-Man goes to save her. Like, he zaps the web down and her. But even in like all those, and there's one or two others that I'm slightly blanking out on right now. But even them, they end up making exceptions in some way or another. Yeah. But again, like, with the comic book thing, right? Like, Batman has to keep going. They've slowly aged Batman over the years. Like, now your Batman is more of a like middle-aged guy, and the original Robin is now like a young man. He's no longer Robin. He's a character called Nightwing. And he has been since, I think Nightwing was introduced in the late 70s. I think late 70s, early 80s. Right?
Is that a play on Darkwing Duck?
Yeah, it was inspired by Darkwing Duck. So yeah, like the original Robin became Nightwing, and there's been other Robins since then. But even that, it's a very slow kind of aging thing. Because again, like, by their nature, these things they have to keep going.
Right.
Like Peter Parker, he started off as a teenager. These days, he's, depending on your interpretation, late 20s. He might be early to mid 30s. Depends on the comic.
If you think about it logically, aside from Superman, because he wouldn't age like everyone else.
Right.
It's sort of weird to think, if you tried to put it into, this was, say, a day in Spider-Man, like when it started, or Batman, because Batman's been around, like you said, since the 30s.
Right.
If you said that was one day, every time something happens, if you wanted to break it down, if you did the math, it probably wouldn't even make any sense, because if you did the math, you would have to say, oh, a lot of times these adventures or things that happen to Batman are happening three or four of them have to happen in the course of a day in order for it to work out. Like, if you wanted to break it down and say, well, it's because all these adventures actually only happen in a 15-year period.
Especially because, like, it's not just the one Batman book or Spider-Man book or something. There's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5.
Right.
And then often they're on teams too. Like Batman has all his regular solo adventures. Then he's in the Justice League, so he has all his Justice League adventures. He was part of a team called the Outsiders at one point, so it was Batman and the Outsiders.
I would love for somebody to work out the math, just for shits and giggles.
I would guarantee.
I would like to do that.
Somebody has.
I guess somebody must
guarantee
have, right?
somebody has.
Just on all of them. Just like, to have like some kind of figures to say how old they would have to be, how many things would have to happen.
So like all right, so here's the thing.
Cramped
and this is numbers. Like it's an old discussion among comic fans, and even though the publishers sort of acknowledge this by artificially moving dates up and stuff like that. You just take Captain America, right? Captain America's whole shtick said he fought in World War II.
Right.
But this big thing happens, he gets frozen, then he gets thawed out years later, and hey, Captain America's back, right? That originally happened in the 60s. Boom, Captain America's back. Oh, I've been frozen for 20 years, now I'm back. But Captain America's shtick is supposed to be he's a man out of time because he's been frozen all these years and all that. But like, no, he's been thawed for 60 years now.
He's no longer out of time.
But they just keep sort of nudging that forward.
Oh, so like, in the movies, does he get unthawed in the 80s or 90s?
He gets unthawed in the 2000s.
Oh.
In the movies. You get somebody like the Punisher, who was a Vietnam vet, but obviously the Punisher isn't, like Vietnam vets are now, what are they, in their 70s, 80s?
Does that drive you nuts as a comic fan?
No.
It doesn't, because I guess if you are into comics, you're used to them finagling the numbers all the time anyway.
You just kind of have to accept it, and if you're not able to accept it, you kind of have to move on.
Oh, that would drive me crazy.
There are a lot of fans who can't, and actually, I mean, and these are fans that drive me out of my mind. And they will get into these heated debates or really really get into the weeds about why this doesn't work because of this reason and that reason and all this other sort of stuff. Like really delving into it and like doing the numbers and figuring all this stuff out. And it's not that they're wrong. They're not. Of course, yeah, this stuff doesn't add up if you think about it too hard. But they're freaking superheroes.
But here's the thing, though.
You can't think about it that hard.
Here's the thing. I understand because there's that thing in me that like that used to drive me nuts when I was a kid. I'd watch a movie and it'd be like, no, that doesn't make any sense. This doesn't work right. It doesn't, that's wrong.
No,
so in comics, I understand their argument. I understand, like, it wouldn't stop me from reading them, but I do understand the itch that it would drive me crazy, because if it doesn't logically...
Oh, I understand too. Like, I get it, but I also kind of feel like it's one of these things where
you're reading books about superheroes, you have to take a step back.
Yeah, you have to let it go, because once you start to dive in at that level, look, superheroes by their very nature fall apart. You even think about things like somebody's powers, like if somebody is super strong, like let's say all of a sudden I take this serum and now I'm strong enough that like I can punch a hole in a tank.
Right.
The moment I go like that, all my bones break.
Right.
Like my bones just shatter.
But they're superheroes.
Because your body is not built. You can't be that strong. You're not built that way. So by default, then then really your superpower isn't just strength. You also have to have like super bones.
Right. You have to be like Wolverine or something where.
Yeah. When you punch, if you punch somebody with that kind of power, you can't just punch it. Like you will literally punch through them.
Right.
Stuff like that. So like
yeah, if you're gonna suspend
you think of like a character like the Flash who can run super fast. Okay, great. So his power is running super fast, right?
But he would ignite immediately.
Or it's like skin would just peel up, so he has to have super skin. If
you're moving through the atmosphere that quick, he would catch on fire.
Yeah. Like there's all sorts of stuff like that. Like if you start to think too hard about superheroes. So there is
if you're willing to suspend for that, you have to be okay with the timelines of things.
Exactly. I
agree with that.
I'll liken it to like if you get into fantasy stuff, like the high fantasy stuff with a lot of magic and all that kind of stuff. If you're willing to accept that world, then you just have to kind of also accept that the rules don't always work right. The only thing that I think they need to do is like just make sure your internal logic is sound. Like internally, make sure your logic, like you don't break your own logic.
Right.
Now, superhero logic means like part of that is just slow as molasses aging. It's just one of the so superhero comics are always set in the modern day. Whatever the modern day happens to be, that's when they're set.
Right.
So all the other kind of stuff just gets fuzzy. I've always been kind of an advocate of constantly starting over. And by that I mean let's see, you got Spider-Man, right? Spider-Man, he has his origin story, blah, 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 and things move on. Every couple of years, like just work your way towards an ending, end Spider-Man's story, and then start again from the beginning and retell his story in a new way and with different character arcs and stories and stuff like that. So that there's, okay, this is our Spider-Man from like 1990 to 1995, and this is Spider-Man from 1996 to 2003, and just constantly read the same way they do with movies.
Right. I would agree with that, and I think that's kind of would work too, because you said that no matter where, it's always in the modern day everything.
Right.
Which makes sense, because you could say it's stories just being retold. They're just retelling a story over and over.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're just updating it just like we used to do, humans did for centuries. You just retold stories and you would update them to fit into the time when you live, kind of.
Exactly. I mean, at this point, superheroes are kind of like, our modern myths and legends and fables.
Yeah, there are, Greek gods in a way.
Absolutely. And those stories have been told and retold, and in many different ways. Yeah, they change and they evolve, and in retellings, things get, switched up and all that. And that's okay. That's fun and exciting. It's part of the human tradition. It's part of the storytelling tradition. And so I kind of like, there's a lot of comic fans. I might even say that the majority of comic fans are really anal about continuity. Like, well, but in this issue of such and such in like 1972, on this page, in this panel, this is what happened and this is what's said. And a lot of the writers will also get to that level too, where they're referencing this crap that happened 40 and 50 years ago, like in real world 40, 50 years ago. And I just, I grew up reading superhero comics. I read them well into adulthood. I haven't really been super into it for a good bit now, but I would like to be. But I'm just
Right, yeah.
That's part of one of the reasons why I don't, because they get to a point where they become impenetrable. You can't you can't just sort of jump into them because they're so built on this bedrock of well, we have to riff on this story from 50 years ago, which riffs on which then got riffed on a story from 40 years ago, which 20 years ago we did a story that built on that one, and it's all that kind of stuff. And I'm just kind of like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Just
you just want to read a good story.
Yeah, like if I want to read a great Daredevil story, just tell a great Daredevil story. I don't give a shit about the reference to issue 117. I don't care.
As somebody who never read comics, and I've told you before that our mutual friend Frank, that he was a big comic guy too, so he used to give me he'd be like, read this.
Yeah.
Just these are things I think you would enjoy. And that when I read Silver Surfer, the storyline with him, I don't remember what it was called, but it was some arc. But the one I always remembered, which is a good example of what you're saying, is Planet Hulk, right? That story arc,
yes,
where he gets sent to and he has to fight in the arena and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I don't care what happened before or what was happening after, or even what led up to the fact that he got sent away. I just enjoyed that story.
Yeah.
And I still remember it. And when the movie came out, I remember I was excited because like, oh, great, I'll get it. Even though you told me it doesn't really follow the comic as good.
It doesn't.
But that's like I just give me that. Give me a short, how many comics of a story, and let me just read that and enjoy that story. I don't care what everything else around it has to do with.
I absolutely agree. Especially because a lot of these characters, like a Hulk and a Spider-Man and a Batman and a Superman, they all have like this kind of core idea that everyone already knows and understands, right? We know what the Hulk is. The Hulk is Bruce Banner, Gamma Experiment, gone wrong.
Gets angry, turns green.
Yeah, he becomes the Hulk, gets angry, turns green. He's a monster. It's, riff on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, yada, yada, yada. So we get that part. That's all you need. So then just take that and tell a good story with that. And I don't need it to connect to everything else. And that's
no, because a lot of times when and I get that plays fan service, but it also sort of stops people from getting into it. That's what happened with She-Hulk. I think I told you I tried watching She-Hulk because people were like, oh, you should try watching it, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't read comics. I don't watch the superhero movies. I said, well, I'll just give it a go. She's a lawyer. Like, this should be. And I watched the first episode, and there was so much, like, things being tossed in from everywhere outside of the universe that was tying it to, the little in-jokes, the comments. There was so much of it because I guess that they had to play fan service that I stopped watching it because 3/4 of the jokes and the comments I had to know what was going on.
Yeah, it makes it.
I couldn't just enjoy this fucking story because it had to do that because they have to play that game, and that means and now I'm not, so I didn't watch it because I can't just jump in.
Comics are 10 times worse for that.
It's that it frustrates me because I would love to. I read a couple comics. I thought they were great stories, but
like the mainstream superhero comics, like the big stuff from Marvel and DC, they're impenetrable to people who aren't following them on a regular basis. And even longtime fans like me, for me to get back into it now, there's like years worth of stuff that I'd have to wrap my head around. Now, because I've read enough in the past, I could probably get up to speed relatively fast. But for the most part, I don't even bother if I even do try to catch up with something new. So, and when I do read something that's relatively recent, I don't bother to check up on what led up to it. And usually the stuff that's the best is doesn't require that. Like, I think the most recent semi-modern thing that I read, and I think at this point it might be, I don't know how old it is at this point, but there was a run on Hawkeye that was really good, that I really liked a lot. I think the artist was Dave Aja or something like that. Matt Fraction, that's who it was, Matt Fraction. Really great run, a lot of fun, great art, very funny, but also exciting, good stories and all that. I don't know how Hawkeye got into this, like where, because it picks up and he's like, he's on his own, away from the Avengers. He gets like an apartment building. I don't know like what led to that, and I kind of don't care.
Yeah,
like,
right.
It was just the self-contained story that had a beginning, middle, and an end, and I was cool with that. Like I did not need to see the further adventures. I didn't need all this background shit. It was just like, give me that one good story, and that was cool. I was happy with that. That made me not bored, unlike Star Wars, which is boring me, and that'll bring us full circle.
I agree.
Star Wars is boring.
Though now that we've had the discussion, maybe I'll have to try and finish or catch up to Mandalorian just to see if I agree.
I will say that I am going to be watching the upcoming show Ahsoka, because I love the character of Ahsoka. She's from the animated shows.
Oh, okay.
Fantastic. She actually might be my favorite Star Wars
so you're
character.
looking forward to that?
Yeah.
What's it called?
Ahsoka. That's the character's name. Being done by Dave Filoni, who's the guy who has been in charge of the animated stuff for a while, and he's excellent.
His name rhymes with baloney.
It does. All right. On that note, yes.
All right. We're done.
Bye, people.